Okay, so now I'm just going to briefly go over the divisions of the nervous system. So the nervous system is the body's communication system. It consists of two major parts, and those parts are the central nervous system, and the central nervous system is the brain right here and the spinal column. And so if you think of center, it's in the center of your nervous system, so your brain and your spinal column. And then you've got the peripheral nervous system, and that is all of the nerves that branch out from the spinal column all the way out to the rest of the body. And so this is all connected, but we're just talking about it as if it's different parts. But the nerves connect to the spinal column, which connect to the brain. So the nervous system breaks into two parts. The peripheral nervous system is then going to break into two parts as well. But before we go anywhere with that, I want to just show you a video to visualize what this is like.
Did you know that the most important part of your entire body is your central nervous system? Your central nervous system, also known as the master system, is made up of your brain and your spinal cord, and it controls every single function in your entire body. In fact, your central nervous system is so important that it's the only body part that is totally encased in bone for its protection. Starting at the top is your brain. And your brain is the central processing unit of your body, and it coordinates and computes all the electrical signals that are sent throughout your nervous system and your entire body. So from your brain, electrical impulses or signals are sent down your spinal cord and travel all the way to the base of your spine. And branching off of your spinal cord are these fine thread-like structures called spinal nerves, and they exit between the vertebrae of the spinal column to supply all your muscles, cells, and organs. And from there, the electrical impulses are sent back up to the brain in a feedback loop. And at every level in your spine, the exiting spinal nerves supply specific muscles and organs. For instance, starting from your lower back, these spinal nerves supply such structures as your legs, reproductive organs, bladder, kidneys, and colon. As we move up the spine to the upper back or thoracic spine, the exiting spinal nerves supply such organs as your liver, stomach, heart, and lungs. Moving up further to your neck, these nerves supply such structures as your eyes, ears, throat, and arms.
Okay, so as you know, the basic unit of the nervous system is the neuron. And so from the brain to the spinal cord to the nerves, if you broke it down to the smallest unit, it would all be made up of neurons. So with that said, though, there are different types of neurons because they have different roles. So the neurons that are in your peripheral nervous system have different names than the neurons that are in your central nervous system. And so before we go on to talk about the different branches of the peripheral nervous system, let's just talk about the different types of neurons that exist throughout the nervous system. So depending on where they're located, neurons can either be sensory. So I have the word nerves here, but you could replace sensory neuron or sensory nerve. A nerve is just a bundle of neurons. So sensory nerves or sensory neurons are in the periphery. So arms, legs, anything that spans out of the body, but these are the neurons that pick up messages from the world. So with touch, so your sensations, we're picking up, or your sounds, anything that you're picking up from outside of the world, and then sending those messages back up to the brain, those are sensory. So we're picking up messages and carrying them back to the brain. The interneurons are what exists in the spinal column in the brain. So sensory is out in the periphery, out here, and then interneuron is what's in the central nervous system. These are the neurons that make decisions. And so they process the information and they decide what to do with them. Motor neurons are also in the periphery, so they're like the sensory neurons, except they take the information from the central nervous system and then they send the response back. So what the brain has decided, they send it back out to maybe muscle movements or to coordinate, organ functioning. They're sending the message from the brain out. They also have different names. So it is important that you know that they could be called afferent with an A or efferent with an E. And it's just another way of saying sensory or motor. So afferent, if you think of like the, sorry, I need to get that off there. Okay, I'm just not going to have that off. Okay, there we go. Okay, so if you think of afferent as going, like if you think of going up the A, going up towards the top of the A, afferent is going up to the brain. So if you're like drawing the line going up on an A, you're thinking of that as going up to the brain. Afferent neurons are the ones that are going up. And then we've got the efferent neurons, and these are the neurons that are exiting, or taking the messages from the brain into the rest of the body. So if you think of A like arrival and E like exit, that might help you, but they're just other names for sensory and motor. Okay, so from this point, I'm going to pause this, but from here on, I'll talk about the different divisions of the nervous system. Okay, so here we are. We're going to talk about the different parts of the peripheral nervous system. So these are the parts on the outside. So on this diagram here, you can see the nervous system breaks down into two parts. We've got the central, which we just talked about that, the brain and the spinal column. That's what's down in the center of the nervous system. But we're going to move down the periphery. That's the nerves. So talking about the differences between the nerves. So there are two different types, somatic and autonomic, and then you can break down autonomic even further. So let's just go ahead and talk about this a little bit. We have a diagram here. You can see the difference between central and peripheral, but we're going to break down peripheral. So peripheral breaks down into somatic and autonomic. Somatic is the nerves, so on the outside, that are sending messages that you have conscious control of. They're the voluntary movements. So I'm moving my hands and I have conscious control of that. And so that is being used through the somatic nervous system, the nerves that I'm able to control the messages through. I think of this like somatic, using some muscle, and if I tell somebody to use some muscle, then they know that they can go and use their body to do something, and they're having control over that, to use some muscle. Autonomic, those are the nerves that go out that are sending messages you don't have control of, and that just sounds like autonomic sounds like automatic. And so these are involuntary functions. They might be messages about digestion or heart rate or things that you can't physically control yourself. And this breaks down into two parts, sympathetic and parasympathetic. So the sympathetic is the part of the nerves that are sending messages that you don't have control of, that are specifically messages that stimulate your body. They call that fight or flight. So these are messages that are sent out in times of stress. It might be your heart rate increasing, or your breathing increasing, but this is just a stimulating message. So it's preparing you for some kind of challenge. It's just anything that you might, any kind of arousal that might happen in stress. So heart rate, pupils dilating, sweat, those are the fight or flight messages. And then, okay. And then finally, the parasympathetic, this is so again, these are the nerves that are involuntary, that you don't have control over, but these are specific to relaxing the body, so getting you ready to sleep or digest, and so it's bringing you down. And I think of this because parasympathetic sounds like parachute, and a parachute brings you down. And so these are the messages that your brain is sending your body to calm yourself down. So slowing down, calming, your heart rate will decrease, your pupils will constrict. And that's it for the parts of the nervous system. So hopefully that made this more understandable.